the share of Google is declining. 40% of our consumers are saying they're using tools like AI to research and to plan. So the idea of AI was like, I didn't want it to be, it's something that happens in the dark room in technology. It needs to be AI for all. That's like a rocket ship in terms of the query, over 10,000 queries coming through, people really using it.
I first heard about you when I was listening to BBC News and you were being interviewed. And the topic was something that we've talked about on the podcast, which was the shift and disruption of Google search by LLMs. And that's, I think you've seen 40% of your traffic or something. And so that's what led me to reach out to you. And then I just uncovered everything that you're doing at Forge Holiday Group. And it's just really impressive. But let's start with you, Graham. Do you want to give everybody a little bit of your background, please?
Sure. Yes. I mean, I've worked in digital for a long time. I was lucky enough that I got curious with digital when I was sort of in my sort of late teens, early 20s. So I sort of fell into it. This is going back at the time where the internet was still relatively new. We were designing things for like CFAX and teletext and
yes,
WAP pages, WAP pages for TV channels and stuff like that. Anyway, I've really had three big jobs in my career. One, I was director of a company called TUI, where it was that long ago I was called the director of new media, because that's what the internet was called back then. And so I was responsible for their sort of e-commerce strategy and planning for the whole of sort of UK, Northern Europe for 7 years. And that really taught me a lot just about the pace of technology and how, if you really get into it, it can create incredible results. And we grew that to, I think it was about 3 billion was the turnover when I sort of left, from literally zero when we joined.
Whoa.
When I joined. So it was incredible. I then left there and went for a company that was a startup called Money Supermarket. So obviously household name in the UK, very own price comparison website. We IPO'd that business and I was there for 7 years, 54 different channels, selling mostly financial service products, but also mobile phones and broadband, energy switching, travel. And then I left it and I found the slightly murky world of private equity and joined a relatively small business called Sykes Cottages that looked after holiday homes for people in the UK. Much, much smaller than everything I've done before. And then we've scaled that over the last, since 2016 to the largest in the UK, managing 30,000 properties, lots of acquisitions, and again, really leading into technology as a key differentiator. And then here I am today.
Yeah, so those kind of three big jobs you outlined, and when I was looking at your career history, and it just seemed the common thread seemed to be adopting the new technologies that have just come onto the scene and are causing disruption, understanding a really diverse group of consumers who either have a problem they need solving, and that problem might be, hey, we want a holiday experience, and then somehow matching a product to meet that in the middle and ultimately deliver what the customers need, but kind of at an ever-increasing scale just through leveraging new technologies.
Yeah, I'm a curious individual. I've always been quite curious about technology and the role that technology can play as an enabler to help scale businesses or to help break down friction in consumer journeys, or to help businesses to sort of give a competitive advantage. So and I've learned over the years, there's waves that happen. I'm old enough to remember the sort of the internet wave. I'm then old enough to remember the mobile wave and then the app wave. And I think we're now in this precipice of this groundswell of the AI wave, where I could just see the pace of change and the curve that's happening, this exponential growth. And this coming together of sort of, huge sort of, complicated sort of data sets that are well understood, the hardware, and then just this this capability that, and the investment that's going in that, will lead to a transformation, I think, in the way that, people behave, buy holidays, and also the way the businesses operate. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and before we get into the AI, because I really want to delve into everything that you guys are doing with AI Day and all these different AI products that you're using, let's just spend a moment on the market.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, not least you've had a global pandemic to hit your market since you've been CEO. Where is the market at now? What are you seeing? And you said you've grown in the UK, which I guess also means regulatory hurdles to get over along the way as well. So just give everyone a little sense of where the market's at, and then we can start then understanding how AI is going to start transforming the
Well,
customer experience.
yeah, I mean, well, let's start with the global market because we're in the holiday business, so it's a nice business to be in, and it's not financial services. Nothing wrong with financial services, but it's not financial services. We're taking people on holiday and we're creating memories and hope they have a really good time. So the global vacation rental market has been growing massively over the years, thanks to people like Airbnb and Booking.com and these platforms that have been created. We think there's something in the region of about 20 to 24 million properties that are managed globally. And it's a super, super, super fragmented marketplace, all over the world. We, as in the Forge Holiday Group, are the fourth or fifth largest in the world with 30,000 properties. So that gives you an idea of the level of fragmentation that is sort of going on. Now, we are a professionally managed property manager. What that basically means is we're not just a pure play technology platform. We have customer service, we do the marketing piece, we do guest sales services, we'll do laundry, maintenance, cleaning, you name it. Just give us your keys and we'll send you money. That market effectively is a long established market in the UK, and long established globally, but it's a market that's existed for 50, 60 years. In fact, some of the brands that we have in our portfolio that we've acquired are 50 years old plus. So it's not a new industry in terms of classical. It's always been quite resilient. We had the global pandemic, and that clearly was quite challenging, but it bounced back very quickly.
Yeah.
And it went from, no one can go on holiday to everybody wants to go on holiday and they want to probably stay more domestic as opposed to going onto airplanes. So that was quite a bumpy ride. I don't want to repeat it ever again because, people were
No,
were unsure and quite aggressive, let's just say, during
I can imagine.
events. It's a market that is probably growing. It's a two-sided market. You have supply, and then you obviously have demand. And it's a market that's probably growing at steady single digit. In the UK, we're seeing somewhere in the region of 4 to 5% growth in supply. Demand is a bit suppressed at the moment, but it does ebb and flow a little bit, despite regulation. It's all over, but despite regulation in sort of the UK, we're still seeing a lot of supply coming into the market. Some of it's been forced into the market because of regulation, because if you have a holiday home and your council tax is doubled or your energy bills have gone up, you might want to start renting that out, whereas you maybe didn't rent it out before. So some people are trying to find a way of offsetting the cost with some income. So that brings new supply into the market. And then, people like to own holiday homes and like to have an asset and use it and get an income from it. And because it's, it's relatively predictable, we're not seeing anything major. We're seeing, we probably are a net benefitor from regulation because we're large and professionally run. So therefore, some of the smaller players or some of the more bad actors in the marketplace, they tend to are getting weeded out, and more people are gravitating towards, the professionals, so to speak. So, a good market, sort of a solid market. There's been lots of consolidation, been lots of M&A over the years.
Right.
Some of that driven by us, and some of it, people have copied what we've done because it does create value. So it's a great industry to be in. And as I said, holidays, people will give up many things before they'll give up the holidays.
Yeah, for sure. And so you've got two primary stakeholder groups. You've got, of course, the people who are paying and searching and want to go on holiday, but then you've got the owners, and that's their product that essentially that you guys are bringing to market and sometimes with that full service wrap around it. So looking then at, so let's go consumer, and then maybe also then talk about the owner community as well, and how AI is going to support them. But in terms of where I first heard you speak, Graham, was about the traffic moving substantially from Google search onto LLMs, which I presume probably for most people means ChatGPT. Can you just talk about that sort of shift in consumer behavior you've seen on the inbound?
Well, I mean, years ago, if you go back, people tended to, they went on a holiday, they went to Google, they put in some keywords, and then hopefully you find your website. And if you're really good at organic listing, you appear at the top. You might buy some keywords on the right hand side, whatever, and then off you go. Dead simple, dead predictable, but not like that now. So as a business like ours, we have to have thousands of partners, thousands of different routes to market. Social media plays a big part of what we do, as well as getting people to come back direct, but still leveraging search engines, be that Google or Bing or however it may be. So it's got much more complicated in terms of distribution, the number of channels. You sort of have to be everywhere because the consumer is everywhere. What we've seen most recently is sort of two things. One, the share of Google is declining. And now some of that is just because of the way that Google are changing their real estate, particularly on the homepage, because very few people go beyond page 1, page 2. I mean, when they're browsing.
Yeah.
And, they're bringing in, more and more AI-driven results effectively, like embedded results. Quite often some of it's through Google-generated product. So you have to participate in that if you want visibility. The sponsored listings are, getting more. So it's like, they're getting faster in terms of the position, and the organic listings are sort of getting pushed further down. So when we look at our business, our visibility, say on organic, is being probably better than ever, but the click-through rate, because it's pushed further down the pages, poor. It's really low compared to what it used to be. So we started saying, well, let's figure out where people are and let's look at it. And what we started to see is probably two things. One is, when we researched our consumers, this is where the 40% figure came from. You mentioned 40% of our consumers are saying they're using tools like AI to research and to plan. Now, they're not necessarily then going from those tools directly into our website, into our offering, but that's growing fast. So that's closer to about 10% of the traffic that's coming through.
Really? Okay, that's high.
Yeah, but it's high, and it's the pace of change as well. Now, 10% of traffic on, say, one of our core platforms that has 50, 60 million visits a year, it's a lot of traffic. So what we're seeing is people that are using LLMs, doing the researching, and some of the LLMs are getting better, and they're obviously then offering up and making recommendations, people like ourselves. But also some of the other AI-driven sort of tools that are coming from Gemini integration or Bing integration, Copilot, whatever it may be. So there's this sort of a new source of sort of a traffic that we need to understand, like, how do you play the game? How do you win? How do you trick it? And we use a couple of tools, one from a company called PKI and one from a company called Autolay, that track, brand, that track queries, that track, visibility, that also track prompting, so we can see what people are doing. And then we monitor that coming through. And then we do a lot of work to say, okay, well, how do we think? We know how to do search and optimization because we've been very good at that.
Yeah.
Then, like, how do you do AI optimization? What does that look like? So we had to sort of, teach ourselves, like, what are these tools looking at? How are they learning? Where are we? What do we need to do? And then, how do we need to improve our website, improve the visibility of our website, the crawlability of our website, the metadata on our website, so we can track it and obviously get, ideally, first mover advantage. So long answer, but that's sort of a...
No, but it kind of needs to be, because you made the point, this has happened so quickly that like there's no playbook for what's the equivalent of SEO on ChatGPT. But interestingly, I put in UK holiday rental, just that simple prompt into ChatGPT, and up came Sykes Cottages first on the... So I thought somehow Graham and his team have kind of got a step ahead on this one. But It was
Yeah.
interesting because what ChatGPT then does, of course, that a Google search won't do is it then started trying to be helpful, and it said, well,
Yeah.
there are various providers. You've got your £300 gorilla Airbnbs and Booking.coms. But it then started saying, but it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for this, then Sykes is the best choice. If you're looking for this, then possibly another provider. So that personalization then to does ChatGPT know my behavior as a consumer?
Mm.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I think if I step back, there's like multiple things we have to do. One is we have to understand what's going on, and then how do we make ourselves more visible? And what we've learned is, you know, the way that Google in particular has sort of worked for years, about, backlinks, about, good structured data, good metadata in particular, about, unique content and all that sort of stuff. A lot of these LLMs, they don't operate like that. So
No.
they're sort of, they're, I'll give you a good example, reviews. But they're sort of, they're looking across, all these different review platforms that exist. And they're not just saying, oh, Psychologies has, a couple of 100,000 really, almost 4.6, 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot. That must be a really good one. They're also saying, well, let me just go and have a look at Google reviews. Let me have a look at Review.io. Let me have a look. And they're taking like a balanced view. And then they're almost like creating their own blended, view as to, well, if they're good across all of them, they must be good. But if they're good on one and not good on the others, well, are they as good? So it's forced us down to the root of,
Mm.
we really need to think about how we build up our capability in all these different review platforms and have a proactive approach to them, which we haven't, we didn't have before. Metadata is a good example on images. We have 500,000 images in our portfolio. And if I'm honest, we've been a little bit lazy on the quality of what's in those metadata,
Right.
in terms of how we're describing things. And we'll say things like, cottage in Cornwall, yeah, stuff like that. But actually, what the AI tools are sort of, looking for is like, a lovely picturesque cottage in Cornwall, with a hot tub overlooking the sea.
It's always the hot tub. That gets
Yeah.
every time. Yeah.
We've had to like put all of our images, again, usefully through an AI tool using an API into, 401 Mini, got it to like review all the images, got it to work out what's in the images, create structured metadata, embed it, and then productionize it. Now, AI allowed us to do that in like 7 days, whereas it probably taken 7 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Human,
Huge job.
but it's just an example of like, we're sort of learning what AI needs, and then we're using AI to help AI become better. And the final part of that, again, not to get too technical, is where we're heading is thinking of building our architecture using a middleware concept, which is called MCP, Model Context Protocol, which is like leveraging sort of the protocol that these AI tools are sort of using to crawl your website and to get access to your data, even if it's unstructured data. So we're building an infrastructure in a platform to allow the AI tools to come and explore and access all this rich data and content, so that we can then take advantage of all these different tools, but also run agent-led sort of campaigns as well.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So just that example of taking all of the images, and as a consumer myself, the longer you're clicking through those images on a certain listing, the more you're kind of falling in love with the property, right? So that's really interesting that AI was able to do that. So takes 7 months of work, probably at least, right? And do that in 7 days.
Well, I mean, images. Sorry, this is a complete rabbit hole, but like, you know, because you can now take a flat image and you can turn it into a video using Runway ML or using Kling or whatever it may be, we're now seeing huge success of actually making, creating product from the images. It would cost me a fortune to create video for every single property, but actually, bringing the units alive and the properties alive more from the images I have, but using AI to do it through some of the tooling, we're seeing tremendous results on the back of that as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you're reliant upon the owner. In some cases, I'm guessing the owner to actually provide the images, or will you always go out and
No, we do both. We
and
always,
shoot them?
we obviously have a team of, professionally trained photographers, and we go out and we shoot our own images. But sometimes, to get a property live and to make the tills ring, quickly,
Yeah.
owners will send us their images, and some owners have got really good images. But again, I'll give you another use case where it's really helping us is our rejection rate on owner-led images is typically 50%. So owners are sending us these images and they're like, the composition's not good, or the pixels aren't quite good, or you don't really have a decent sort of a camera, whatever it may be. That we have moved that from 50% to less than 24% through leveraging AI tooling and capability to enhance it. So we're using AI again to sort of, to accept more of those images, which keeps the owner happy, but also allows us to get properties live quicker as well. And we have a small team that do a lot of retouching. And obviously retouching was very much, going in, uploading it, sticking it into Adobe, doing all that, skilled role. We've just got programs now, that we can just like automate and run through some of the AI tooling that does it. Still making it authentic, but again, it's just another example of just scale.
Yeah, indeed. So getting into the program activity that you've introduced at Forge. So I've just been going through, I have my research here. It's just incredible. So, so many kind of companies out there are experimenting with AI. We know that. But you're not seeing a company kind of form that into an overall business transformation program and then announcing it to staff. This is what we're going to do. And then, of course, I'm really interested to get that. What was the perspective, kind of fears or excitement from your staff? But could you talk about the overall program? And I was just watching AI Season 2, the video you put out there on LinkedIn, which I'd encourage everybody to go check out Graham's LinkedIn profiles. All sorts of great content on there. But Graham, what was the strategy for the business with this?
Selfishly, I sort of, look, I work in a growth business, and we're always trying to find a competitive advantage. It's quite cutthroat out there. So anything we can do that will give us a competitive advantage, but also anything we can do to make it easy for all of our people to do their job is really useful. And we have amazing people in our business, and I want to leverage the human capital to do the really added value things, to deepen our moat in our business. And so I'm thinking, I was thinking, how do we give everybody a 30% advantage? Like 30%, or a superpower, as I often sort of call it. I want to give you a superpower. So the idea of AI was like, I didn't want it to be, it's something that happens in the dark room in technology or even product, whatever. It needs to be AI for all. So we created a program called AI for All, which basically meant, everybody in the organization, AI at the moment can't help you make a bed in a cottage yet, or cut the grass yet.
Yeah.
We need that like interface of sort of robotics and AI to sort of work, but who knows? But we have 1,100 people out of the sort of 1,800 people that are logging in, that are in operations doing the tooling. So the idea was let's create a policy so everybody knows what we should be doing. Let's give people access to tools and approve those sort of the tools so that actually we know what's going on. And then let's create this like deep program of education and sort of a learning and knowledge base, everything from, compulsory training through to creating AI guardians that will be like advocates, through to leveraging the levy we have and using people like Multiverse to do like AI sort of a training. And then let's just communicate it, but do it in a way we're showing real life examples as opposed to this like notional. So, everything we're trying to do is like, let me give you an example of what we've done, and then creating a culture within the organization where we embed AI effectively into our strategic thinking. So we principally do, three things. We think about our excellence in our people, we think about excellence in supply, and we think about, really our owners and the overall sort of owner sort of a proposition, how we deliver excellence for those owners as well, which is really about service. And so then we sort of say, well, AI can help everywhere. So, how do we leverage AI to give that competitive advantage? And I have to say, we've now got, I think we're at, well over 50% of everybody is using one of the AI tools, every week. But what's really cool is to watch. We use a tool called Netscope, and what Netscope does is every time anybody logs in, we track everything.
Okay.
Big Brother's watching, so we can
Yeah.
see all the tooling, we can see the prompting, we can everything. But what's really cool is not just the people logging in and being curious; it's the adoption curve in terms of the amount of usage, and that's like a rocket ship in terms of the queries. Over 10,000 queries coming through, people really using it. And what I love is, and even yesterday, like people were messaging me sort of saying, I found this thing that AI can do for us, and it's just like, oh my God, it's transformed the way that I look at things, the way I sort of do things. So, originally, people were thinking, is this just another one of Graham's ideas where he's trying to get rid of everybody by using AI and, and save all the money to the bottom line, because we have a big salary bill. And I was very clear saying that is not our intention. Our intention basically is to be 30% better. If we're 30% better, then that's going to create value for the organization, value for everybody, shareholders, etc., and give us that competitive sort of a lift, because we're sort of a growth business, and we're not trying to shrink to greatness. We're trying to sort of scale the organization and have a competitive advantage. So I'd be blown away just by
Wow.
directions. But I have to say, Ben, it has been a lot of communication, and it helps it coming from the top from me, and it helps that I'm sort of a closet geek that sort of I'll every opportunity I'm reinforcing it, and but I can see the groundswell, the curve, the change that's happening on people that are a bit like, I
Yeah.
get it now. And the one department that was most negative was our technology department to start with.
Right. That's
And,
interesting.
and I would hear things like, yeah, it can write code as good as me,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
but now I think, using GitHub Copilot and use some of the codecs and some of the agentic coding that's going in, I think they're now saying, oh, this is brilliant. This can get me going. I can, and then I come back and like, I just need to put the real magic on it, which is the additional 50%, but it gets me to the first part really quickly.
I think that's a really positive way of looking at it, and that's how I look at AI. I know it's so easy to go to doomsday that the whole workforce is getting slashed. Well, you haven't really seen that where companies are changing the nature of their workforces. But we've had companies like Klarna who try to make savings in customer services and brought all the roles back. And it's I spent many years working in outsourcing in contact center environments and other business processes, and it just is. It's nothing new that companies have looked for efficiencies. But I think the big opportunity is what you've just said, which is no, let's take the people we've got and make them 30% better.
Mm.
And so how do you then do that in an inclusive way when you've got a group of people over here that, hey, they use ChatGPT the whole time outside of work, and this other group who never heard of what an LLM is. And so that training piece sounds vital. Is that like a mandatory training that you've done? And I also want you to just talk through the AI day, which looked like a big kind of company-wide launch. How have you been kind of getting people on board with this, Graham?
Well, it's part of those three pillars, the sort of the policy, the tooling, and then the education. A big part of that was then the training, and we wanted to train everybody on using AI. So we ended up we originally looked at like Coursera, because there's tons of free stuff out there. Microsoft does
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, yeah.
and we did we worked with a third party company up in Edinburgh called Create Future, and they were like really early adopters in sort of AI, and they had created lots of training for their engineers, and we looked at their training to whether we could use their training, but it was quite specific to sort of engineers, and they did like an AI evaluation for us as well, which is quite interesting, which maybe we can come back to. Anyway, in
Mm.
the end, we thought, well, do you know what? Let's just create it ourselves. So what we did is we created an AI agent called Aiden, and we co-hosted Aiden with one of our learning and development team. And so Aiden basically is a voice agent within ChatGPT that will create an identity. And then the training is a conversation that's happening between the human from an LLM or
Sure.
from our learning and development team and Aiden, and there's four modules. Sorry, there's four courses, and then there's roughly 8 modules in each course. And the very basic one is like, just what is an LLM? What does it do? What is AI? What does it do? So level 1 and level 2 are compulsory. Everybody,
Right.
and we track that again. So everybody in the organization has to do it. And when you get to the end of sort of a level 2, we've taught you things like, how to do better prompting. And we're giving you real world examples of like, how, Copilot integrated into the Teams channels and what you can do to draft emails and do all that sort of stuff. So we'll give you some real tooling. Level 3 and level 4 are like the next more advanced sort of levels, where we're getting into trying to really teach people more detailed ways of like, for sort of a key stages of a prompt, or how to build certain things in vibe coding, if they want to sort of do some like rapid prototyping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's probably level 5, which is more like wizard level, but I haven't quite gone to that sort of where we're into like, really the clever stuff. But we have got some people who are at that level because they are going home at night and they're like immersing themselves in YouTube and various different things. And, in parallel to that, we also, we have people on year-long apprenticeship courses, which is like using our government levy, and we've actually been able to tap into other people's levy as well, because there's some businesses out there that can't use the levy, and that's been quite interesting for us. So we've got, I think we're going to have about 40 people that are doing the year long, and I think it's 6 to 8 hours of training each week for 52 weeks. And again, these people will come back and they'll form part of our guardians, which are the sort of to spread the word effectively. So so it's early stages, but it's it's going pretty well, because each time a module comes out and people complete it, we can see that curve going up in terms of that usage.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really interesting, and I can't think of a better apprenticeship to do for one's career than
I
6 to
know.
8 hours a week, paid for by your employer. That's fantastic. So let's just talk a little bit. What have you done around the wrap around this, around governance
Yeah.
and guardrails and privacy issues? Was that as much of a challenge as it's
Okay. So,
being talked about?
well, you asked about the AI day. So we created an AI day, and it was like, get everybody together and bring in people from faculty AI, like experts, bring in multiverse, and have a whole day. And we streamed it live across the whole company. And then we had lots of people in our head office, and it was just like, everything about it. A big part of that also was educating people on like the do's and the don'ts. And we created an agent using HeyGen 11 Labs called an AI Josh. And AI Josh actually was a clone of someone in our legal department to deliver. So again, the reason I'm saying that is that, we're using tooling to educate, and I think people sort of get it, which is quite interesting. I think we even made them talk Italian just for fun. And so we basically created a policy and a governance policy, which done sort of two things. One is it educated people what they can and can't do. It was very clear around, because I wanted everybody to be able to use as many tools as they can. Now we had enterprise tools where clearly people, you sort of can't go wrong really within reason. And then obviously, but we still wanted people to be able to use non-enterprise tools, and that has a whole set of things that you can and can't do. And here's the rules. So we just educated people about what you can do. We explained to people why there's certain tools they want to use that they can no longer use. So we had a tool that was recording all the transcripts on all of our Teams calls, and we removed that, but we told them why. And it was all to do with like data, security, provision, what was happening, and exposure. So
Yeah.
you gave them some real life examples. DeepSeek, is a good example. We're like, do you know what? There's a reason why we're using DeepSeek, et cetera, et cetera. So we went through all of that. Then we created a what I would call like a rapid software approval process. So if someone was finding a tool and they wanted to use it, we created a process that you'd have like a 3 to 4 day turnaround. So you just filled out a form, you told what you want, you justified it, and then we had this like rapid approval process. And then that went on to then the approved tooling list, so people could sort of see it as well. So we sort of created that. And I have to say, during AI Day, the one session that had the most questions was probably that session, because
Right.
the real thirst and appetite that people were afraid. They were like,
Mm.
I don't know what to do. Should I log in with my personal email address? Should I log in with my Forge email address? What about, can I put spreadsheets up there? And, what if I'm putting sensitive data in there? What can I do? What can I do? What happens to it? Are you tracking everything? All that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, just constant sort of education. But the policy, policy is not, it's not an endearing term, it sounds like policy, but actually we wrote it in such a way that it was like, fit for purpose, because we also
Yeah.
recognize this is new. There's a bit of experimentation, and there's a bit of trust that's going on
Yeah.
here as well. Like, we're not bringing down like the portcullis, we want you to have freedom. We then have these guardians, and the guardians actually have like a more relaxed usage. So these are people that are handpicked that, have got a high degree of sort of flexibility. And what we do with them is they're allowed to, experiment more. They're given budgets to go and, like, if they want to buy credits and tokens, they're given a budget to go and do things and learn from it. So, and we have to give that level of freedom just so people, can experiment, because it's changing every day. It's
Yes.
evolving every
Yeah.
single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. And I guess uh, if that's the theme, is we want to enable you to be 30% better, and taking away any of the drudgery from your job role. And I'm thinking, um, you know, when AI first came out, it was obvious customer services looked like it could be a real improvement, not just for the outcome for the consumer, but also for the customer services agent as well. It's just the amount of laborious process involved in that, and it being slow. Are you starting to now see people kind of putting their hands up and saying, actually, I wasn't sure, but actually this has really helped me?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you two examples, a positive and a negative. A positive one is, we take 1 million contacts a year in the contact center. We record every single call through sort of a Twilio. The team then would spend 10 minutes after that writing up all the notes.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't really need to do that. Here's a transcript. Let's summarize the transcript. Let's use AI to do it, and then provide you with a transcript. And that is like, save, 10 to 15 minutes maybe in every single call. It took a while for people to trust it. It's like, people were still like going in and checking it. And now,
check its homework.
yeah. And now what happens is we then use that. So when people are then contacting us, we obviously will identify the phone number, and we can pop up that AI summary and say, Graham Donoghue called before about this, here's a sort of summary of the last call. So it gives them that instant,
Yeah,
advantage. But a negative, if it is a negative, is we have a lot of agents now that are doing tasks and performing tasks, be it a chatbot agent or even a voice agent. Now these agents obviously are trained, but they're trained on what our policy is for things, terms and conditions, whatever it may be. And what we're finding is they're doing the job brilliantly, but because they're trained on a policy, they're giving responses to owners or consumers that they don't want to hear.
right.
Because a human agent will like listen, it'll empathize, and it takes a judgment call, doesn't it? About what is someone going to do. But an agent, an AI agent, a agentic or a bot agent doesn't. It's like, well, that's it. So what we're finding is they're answering 30% of the queries. In theory, it should be to resolution, but then because we also then allow the consumer or the owners to then, if you're not satisfied, do you want to speak to a human, that's actually creating more of a workflow into the sort of the human team effectively. And they're dealing with, well, I know your policy is like, can't get all my money back because I'm cancelling and I'm going on Friday. But let me just tell you, about the circumstances and that.
The background. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges I think we have, which is there's always a judgment call, and there's like, we're not quite at like emotional intelligence and empathy built into some of this sort of a tooling yet. There is tools like Sesame AI and a whole bunch of other ones that are getting there, and we can train these models. But it's leading to more, downstream work effectively for the individuals.
Yeah, and look, you're clearly going for first mover advantage here with this new technology, trying to leverage it. and given the pace of change, I always think from a practical perspective, well, if we don't implement something and sort of get going with it and learn as a team together, what's it really good at? Where do we need to refine it and iterate? What's the alternative to that? Well, it's kind of wait. And now does not seem to be the time to wait. Now seems to be the time to seize the bull by the horns somewhat.
Yeah.
And so where are you going next? I'm just keeping an eye on time as well, Graham. Where are you going next with AI? And then the other question that was kind of looping through my mind was, are you seeing any challenges with kind of core LLM availability? Like ChatGPT yesterday was awful. It was on offline,
Yep.
asking you to retry. I don't know if you're Microsoft, so you may be Copilot type house, but yeah, where are you going next with AI, and then anything around system availability that you've learned?
Where we're going next is, everywhere. It's sort of the short answer. If I think of it in big buckets of things we're playing around with, our job is, plan, booking, and enjoying a holiday. Plan, book, enjoy. Well, what we recognize is we're really quite good at the booking part. We need to probably get better at the planning part, and the enjoying part, I think, is an area that we haven't really dabbled in. We just sort of let people do their own thing. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment around actually building agents and building, task-driven agents that can just like do that whole conversational AI, like trip planning and various different things, the whole end-to-end experience. So we're doing quite a lot of work there, and actually we're then feeding that into the algorithm and the way that our search results behave and they work as well. The other area obviously we're looking at is what I spoke about before about this MCP, about building this sort of architecture that's like AI enabled, actually allows us to, all the tooling that we're sort of got and all the content we're sort of got, we open it up and we give exposure to it. So that's quite a big piece of work as well. And I think the other area, we're going to sort of keep leading into effectively is really around the coding and the prototyping and all that sort of stuff that we're doing. It's a big part of what we do here. We build product, so how do we get stuff live sort of quite quickly? But I mean, the short answer to all of that is like we're trying to use things everywhere. Investing in capability, investing in technology, investing in people, and making sure that the millions of pounds that we spend each year on tooling and capability and all that sort of stuff, there's a big proportion of it going into sort of AI. Now, we haven't had any major system related sort of issues, I would say. We are a Copilot LLM sort of a house. We use a lot of the API connections into a lot of the LLMs. I don't know whether the ChatGPT problem we had yesterday impacted the API. I suspect it probably did. We are seeing as we're getting more advanced, we're having to sort of make sure that the token availability and the tokens that we're using. So a very simple prompt may use X number of tokens, but we're getting more advanced. So like we're seeing a 4x or 5x in tokens usage. That means that the free programs or the $20 a month program, whatever, are no longer good enough. So VO free is a good example on video stuff that's sort of coming through from Google. Like what we're trying to do on that requires quite a lot of investment. So we're having to like make sure we proportion some of our OpEx spend, effectively our software spending, to say, actually we're going to need X number of, because I think what everybody's recognizing is the token usage in particular is way more than people were expecting, and the capability because it's advancing. So we need to make sure we're prepared for that as well.
Yeah, for all CFOs out there, so sorry these tokens have arrived.
It's a new language, isn't it? Yeah, like I need to buy more tokens. Like what? I need to buy more coins.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, OpEx pressures cometh from tokens. That's for sure. So just closing out then, and Graham, it's just fascinating what you're doing, and I think pretty inspirational actually. So thank you for coming on talking about it. So just looking at something called hyperpersonalization. So personalization's been around forever.
Mm.
Hyper-personalization seems to be that thing of now my AI, my behavior is recorded and feeds in. And maybe that's you're really good at the booking. Maybe that's going to help with planning. And then maybe that's going to help with the enjoy kind of categories you outlined there. Is that where you see the whole kind of market moving towards, is much more personalized approaches from companies like yourselves?
Yeah, but I think, we're all trying to understand intent better, so, and actually we're trying to be more relevant and more specific. And I think when you're a scale business like us and you've got tens of thousands of properties, presenting a customer with, here's one of 22,000 properties you can pick. Now, we do a lot of work in the algorithm. We do a lot of work on like relevancy. We do a lot of work on like, inputs. We do a lot of work on, best fit. And we've been investing probably for the last 12 months in AI and machine learning, and to sort of get the perfect set of results. But again, most people only buy from the first page, effectively. But I think if I think of like the perfect is the singularity, which is like here's your result, here's the one. And, when I was at Money Supermarket, we used to think about um, good, better, best a lot. This
Mm.
idea of like present sort of free, and that's why we had two arms of that business. We had Money Supermarket, we show you everything, and then we had a business called Money Saving Expert, where you had like Martin Lewis as an individual saying like, you want a credit card? Here's the three best credit cards that you should look at. So they did that concierge filtering. But yes, hyper personalization. What we have to be really careful about, because I've done this long enough in my career, is like travel's one of those products where people like to browse, they like to explore the 90s. So you got to be careful not to make it too hyper personalized, because that
Yeah.
turns people off. So I think the trick is, we've done some work for you. Here you go. We think this is good. However, here's all this other stuff, and go away and browse and play, etc. But I think if you have an agent, an agentic agent working with you, who's that like your digital twin, that's sort of guiding you through it and giving you, questions and answers, and almost like a white glove concierge, but agent driven. I think that's going to be pretty cool. And I can see some sort of a capability there as we know more and more about you as an individual to make it relevant. So yeah, I think it's a big opportunity there, but we just have to be careful you don't go from 0 to 10,
Yeah.
like the steps you have to go through.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the buying experience is a really good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to just be, hey, look, have you seen this place? It looks really cool, and yeah, underpinning all of that, it's like, well, what's under there? The metadata on our images, that's the piece you just never see as the consumer. But no, that's absolutely fascinating, Graham. Where do people find you, follow you if they want to reach out and maybe learn a bit more?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn, as you mentioned before. I mean, I think I do a post quite often on a Friday. I call it Friday Data, where I'm like, I'm sharing a lot of data and sort of insight. More and more will be sharing a lot of AI related, use cases. So like practical examples of like things that we're sort of doing, and tooling and various different things as well. So you can stalk me on LinkedIn. That's the best.
Yes, stalk Graham on LinkedIn. I will drop your LinkedIn profile link into the show notes. And Graham, thanks very much. It'd be great to probably check back in maybe in 6 months and see how you guys are doing with your AI vision. It's really exciting. So thanks very much, Graham, and you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.